The acrid tang of gunpowder hung in Maya's nostrils, a phantom scent that followed her everywhere, a ghost of her former life. Huddled on the park bench, her weathered jacket pulled tight against the autumn chill, she watched the world pass by, with hollow eyes, the precise marksmanship that once made her a legend, now relegated to distant memory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The shooting range stood like a fortress at the edge of town, its red brick facade and bold sign promising precision and power to those who entered. Inside, laughter and the rhythmic percussion of gunfire created a symphony of confidence, a stark contrast to the silence that had become Maya's constant companion. She lingered at its perimeter, drawn to the familiar sounds yet hesitant to cross the threshold that separated her past from her present. The small town of Easton prided itself on its patriotism, evident in the flags that adorned nearly every storefront and the annual Memorial Day parade that drew crowds from neighboring counties. Yet for all its star-spangled enthusiasm, the town remained oblivious to the woman who slept in its shadows, a decorated veteran whose medals now lay at the bottom of a backpack alongside her fading hopes. Maya Fletcher stood at the chain-link fence, her fingers curled through the metal as she watched the shooters on the range. Some were weekend warriors, their stances awkward and their grips uncertain. Others moved with the fluid confidence of professionals. She studied them all with the clinical detachment of someone who had once been the best. "You planning on coming in, or just casing the joint?" The voice startled her, gruff but not unkind. Maya turned to find a barrel-chested man with salt and pepper hair watching her, arms crossed over a polo shirt emblazoned with Easton Shooting Academy. "Just watching," she replied, her voice raspy from disuse. The man, whose name tag identified him as Director Greg Winters, nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as they took in her threadbare clothes and the military-issue duffel at her feet. "You shoot?" he asked. Though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer, Maya's laugh was hollow. "Once upon a time." "Military?" She nodded, a short, sharp movement that discouraged further questions. Greg seemed to consider. This, his weathered face creasing in thought. "We've got a charity event this weekend. Professional marksmen competing, raising money for veteran services. Could use someone to help set up targets, maybe run the sign-in table." The offer hung in the air between them, neither charity nor demand, but something in between, an opportunity. Maya felt something stir within her, a flicker of purpose that had been absent for so long. "I could do that," she said finally, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Greg handed her a card with the Academy's logo and an address scrawled on the back. "Be there tomorrow, 7 a.m. We'll see what you've got." As he walked away, Maya stared at the card, its edges sharp against her calloused fingertips. A door had opened, just a crack, but it was more than she'd had in months. The following morning arrived with a chill that seeped through Maya's layers as she approached the academy. The sky was still dark, the first hints of dawn just beginning to paint the horizon. She had spent the night beneath the town's water tower, her backpack as a pillow, her thoughts racing between hope and terror. Greg was already there, unlocking the front door as she approached. He acknowledged her with a nod, saying nothing about her early arrival or the same clothes she'd worn the day before. "Coffee's inside," he said simply, pushing the door open. The academy was larger than it appeared from the outside, with an indoor range to the right and a sprawling outdoor facility visible through the back windows. Trophies lined the walls, alongside photographs of serious-faced competitors holding rifles aloft. Maya's eyes were drawn to a poster announcing the weekend's event, Precision challenge, pros shoot for vets. The irony wasn't lost on her. Greg emerged from a back room with 2 steaming mugs, handing one to Maya without asking if she wanted it. She accepted gratefully, the warmth seeping into her hands. "So," he began, settling into a chair behind the front desk. "What's your story, Fletcher?" Maya tensed, her fingers tightening around the mug. "What makes you think I have one?" "Everyone's got a story, especially folks who end up watching shooting ranges from the outside." She took a sip of coffee, buying time. "Not much to tell. Served 3 tours. Sniper unit, got out, couldn't adjust." Greg's eyes lingered on her face, seeing more than she wanted to reveal. PTSD? The acronym hung in the air, clinical and cold, failing to capture the nightmares that plagued her, the panic that seized her lungs in crowded places, the memories that ambushed her when she least expected them. "Among other things," she admitted. He nodded as if her vague response confirmed something he'd already suspected. "VA help at all?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya's bitter laugh was answer enough. "Well," Greg said, draining his mug, "we've got work to do. The outdoor range needs to be prepped for the competition. 4 stations, 1,000-yard targets. Think you can handle it?" The challenge in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Maya straightened, a spark of her old pride flickering to life. "I could do it in my sleep," she replied. As the day progressed, Maya fell into the familiar rhythm of range work. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget: the precise measurements between firing positions, the careful placement of target stands, the methodical checking of safety equipment. Greg worked alongside her, his movements efficient and purposeful, asking few questions, but watching her with an attention that suggested he was making mental notes. By midday, other staff began to arrive, mostly younger men and women who looked at Maya with curiosity, but kept their distance, taking cues from Greg's businesslike demeanor. "The pros start arriving tomorrow for practice," Greg informed her as they broke for lunch, sharing sandwiches from a local deli. "You'll be helping," Cassie at the registration table, then assisting on the range as needed. Maya nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety forming in her stomach at the thought of being surrounded by people. Professionals who would recognize the technical knowledge she possessed, who might ask questions she wasn't prepared to answer. "Where are you staying?" Greg asked suddenly, the question catching her off guard. She hesitated, unwilling to admit that her accommodations consisted of whatever sheltered corner of town she could find each night. Greg's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "We've got a cot in the back room. Sometimes staff crash there during tournaments. You're welcome to it." The offer was made casually, without pity, allowing Maya to accept without feeling like a charity case. She nodded, relief washing over her at the prospect of a roof, however temporary. That evening, after Greg had left, Maya sat on the edge of the cot, the shooting range quiet around her. On impulse, she pulled her backpack close and dug through its contents until her fingers found the small velvet pouch hidden at the bottom. Inside was her most prized possession, a challenge coin given to her by her commanding officer after she'd made a shot that saved her entire unit. The weight of it in her palm was comforting, a tangible reminder of who she had once been. She fell asleep clutching it, her dreams for once free of explosions and screams, replaced by the methodical rhythm of breath control and the perfect moment of a clean shot. The next morning brought chaos as competitors began to arrive. Maya found herself stationed at the registration table alongside Cassie, a cheerful college student whose rapid-fire questions Maya deflected with monosyllabic responses until the Girl got the message and focused on welcoming the arriving shooters. Maya recognized some of them from magazines and training videos, men and women whose names were spoken with reverence in military circles. They carried custom rifles in hard cases, their movements conveying the easy confidence of those at the top of their game. One man in particular caught her attention, tall and lean, with a military bearing that was unmistakable even in civilian clothes. As he approached the registration table, Maya felt a jolt of recognition, quickly followed by a surge of panic. Colonel James Harrington had been her commanding officer during her second tour. Before his promotion had taken him to a different unit. He had witnessed her at her best. Now he would see her at her worst. Maya ducked her head, hoping to avoid recognition, but as he reached the table, his stride faltered. "Fletcher?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "Maya Fletcher?" She looked up reluctantly, meeting his gaze. "Sir." Harrington's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been concern. "What are you doing here?" Before she could answer, Greg appeared at her side. "You two know each other?" "Colonel Harrington was my CO, Maya explained, her voice tight. "Second tour." Greg's eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing. Harrington was still staring at her, taking in her worn clothes and the dark circles under her eyes. "I heard you were out, but I didn't expect. To find me working registration at a shooting competition?" Maya finished for him, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "Life takes unexpected turns, sir." An awkward silence descended, broken only when another competitor called Harrington's name from across the room. He hesitated, clearly wanting to say more. "We should catch up," he said finally, "after the registration rush." Maya nodded non-committally, relief flooding through her as he moved away. She felt Greg's eyes on her but avoided his gaze, focusing intently on the registration forms before her. The morning passed in a blur of names and numbers, Maya functioning on autopilot as she processed competitors and answered basic questions about the event. She was aware of Harrington's occasional glances in her direction, but pretended not to. Notice, grateful for the constant stream of people that kept confrontation at bay. Around noon, Greg tapped her shoulder. "Need you on the range. Some of the pros want to do practice runs, and we're short-staffed for spotting." Maya followed, him outside, where the autumn sun did little to warm the crisp air. The outdoor range was impressive, a sprawling expanse with shooting stations at various distances, the farthest targets barely visible at the 1,000-yard mark. "You'll be spotting for lane 3, Greg instructed, handing her a high-powered spotting scope and a radio. "Call hits and misses, wind changes if you spot them." Maya took the equipment, a familiar weight in her hands. Spotting had been part of her training, the symbiotic relationship between spotter and shooter essential for long-distance accuracy. She positioned herself at the designated spot, setting up the scope with practiced efficiency. The shooter assigned to lane 3 was a woman Maya had seen in competitive shooting magazines, Diane Reynolds, multiple national champion and Olympic medalist. She approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the best in any room. "You my spotter?" she asked, her tone making it clear she expected someone more impressive. "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied, falling back on military formality. Diane looked skeptical but didn't argue, instead focusing on setting up her rifle, a custom-built precision instrument that probably cost more than most people's cars. Maya watched her through the scope as she settled into position, noting the perfect form, the controlled breathing, the steady hands. "Winds coming from the west, about 3 miles per hour, Maya reported, falling easily into the role despite the years away from it. Slight updraft near the target, Diane adjusted her scope minutely, her expression focused. "Ready when you are." "Send it," Maya confirmed, watching through the scope as Diane squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, and Maya tracked its impact. "Hit center ring 1 o'clock." Diane fired again, and again Maya called the hit with precision. They fell into a rhythm, shooter and spotter working in tandem, communicating in the shorthand of professionals. By the 5th shot, Diane's initial skepticism had faded, replaced by a grudging respect. "You've done this before," she remarked during a pause to adjust her scope. "A lifetime ago," Maya replied. As the afternoon wore on, word spread among the competitors about the homeless woman who could spot with uncanny accuracy. Maya found herself in demand, moving between lanes to assist different shooters, her expertise evident in every call she made. She felt something awakening within her. Not happiness exactly, but a sense of competence, of being in her element after so long adrift. Harrington found her as the practice session was winding down, the setting sun casting long shadows across the range. He approached cautiously, as one might a skittish animal. "You haven't lost your touch," he observed, nodding toward the spotting scope she was cleaning. Maya shrugged. "Some things stay with you. Like what happened in Kandahar." The name of the city hit her like a physical blow. Memories surging unbidden, the dust, the heat, the weight of her rifle, the impossible shot that had saved dozens of lives, including Harrington's. "I don't talk about that," she said, her voice barely audible. Harrington nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I've followed your career, you know, after I transferred. Heard about your 3rd tour, the recognition you received, then nothing. You just disappeared." That was the idea. He studied her face, searching for something. "What happened, Fletcher?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. What had transformed a decorated sniper into a homeless veteran? What had driven her from glory to obscurity? Maya turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "Life happened, sir. War happened. Then coming home happened." Before Harrington could respond, Greg appeared, his expression unreadable. "Need a word, Fletcher?" Grateful for the interruption, Maya nodded a quick goodbye to Harrington and followed Greg back toward the main building. The sun had almost completely set, the temperature dropping rapidly as darkness claimed the range. "You made quite an impression today," Greg remarked as they walked. Maya said nothing, uncertain whether his tone indicated approval or concern. "Diane Reynolds asked specifically about you. Wanted to know if you'd be her spotter for the competition tomorrow." Surprise flickered across Maya's face. "She did. Said you were the best she'd worked with in years." Greg paused, turning to face her. "Which makes me wonder why someone with your skills is sleeping rough instead of working in the industry. There are dozens of jobs for someone with your expertise." The implied question hung in the air between them. Maya felt the weight of it pressing down on her, the expectation of an explanation she wasn't ready to give. "It's complicated," she said finally. Greg studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But whatever's keeping you away from the firing line, it's a waste of talent." They reached the main building in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As Greg unlocked the door, he added, "By the way, Colonel Harrington asked about you too. Wanted to know how long you'd been working here." Maya tensed. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you showed up yesterday and I offered you temporary work." He pushed the door open, gesturing for her to enter. "I also told him you're the most natural spotter I've seen in 30 years of running this place." Inside, the building was quiet, the staff and competitors having departed for the day. Maya made her way to the back room, where the cot awaited, her mind churning with the day's events. She had managed to avoid direct confrontation with her past, but tomorrow would bring the actual competition, more people, more pressure, more potential for the carefully constructed walls around her memories to crumble. As she settled onto the cot, the door to the back room opened and Cassie poked her head in. "Sorry to bother you," the young woman said, her perpetual cheerfulness somehow not grating after a day of working together. "But there's someone here to see you. A woman. Says her name is Meredith Harrington." Maya frowned, the name unfamiliar yet holding an echo of recognition. "Harrington?" "Colonel's wife," Cassie explained. "She's waiting in the front office." Curiosity overcoming her reluctance, Maya followed Cassie to the office, where an elegant woman in her 50s stood examining the trophies displayed on the wall. She turned as Maya entered, her face lighting with a warm smile that seemed at odds with the formality of her tailored blazer and pearls. "Sergeant Fletcher," she greeted Maya, extending a hand. "I'm Meredith Harrington. James told me he'd seen you today." Maya shook her hand automatically, confusion evident in her expression. "Ma'am, please, call me Meredith." She gestured to the chairs by the desk. "May we sit? I won't take much of your time." They sat, Maya perched on the edge of her chair, ready for flight. Meredith's posture was relaxed, her smile genuine, but Maya had learned to be wary of kindness. It often came with expectations she couldn't meet. "James told me what happened in Kandahar," Meredith began, her voice gentle. "How you saved him and the others. He says he owes you his life." Maya shifted uncomfortably. "He doesn't owe me anything. I was doing my job." "Nevertheless," Meredith leaned forward slightly, "he also told me you seemed to be going through a difficult time." The understatement almost made Maya laugh. A difficult time hardly captured the years of nightmares, the failed attempts at civilian life, the gradual loss of everything she had once valued. "I'm fine," she said automatically. Meredith's expression made it clear she wasn't convinced. "James and I run a foundation for veterans, particularly those struggling with reintegration. We have resources, housing, job placement, counseling." Ah, there it was. The offer of help that would require Maya to bare her soul, to become a project, a rehabilitation success story. She had heard similar pitches before, had even tried some programs, only to find that the help offered came with conditions she couldn't meet or costs she couldn't bear. "Thank you, but I'm not interested," she said, her tone final. Meredith seemed unsurprised by the rejection. "I understand, but I'd like to leave you my card in case you change your mind." She placed a business card on the desk between them. "No pressure, no expectations, just an open door whenever you're ready." She rose to leave, then paused, reaching into her pocket. "One more thing. James asked me to give you this." She handed Maya a small, weighty object. Another challenge. Coin, different from the one Maya kept in her pouch. This one bore the insignia of Harrington's current unit and an inscription on the back, "For those who watch over us." "He had it made after Kandahar," Meredith explained. "Carries one himself. Says it reminds him that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected quarters." After Meredith left, Maya sat alone in the office, turning the coin over in her hands, its edges sharp against her skin. 2 challenge coins now, bookends to a career cut short, reminders of a woman she had once been. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of the academy. Inside, Maya Fletcher faced the prospect of tomorrow's competition with a mixture of dread and an unfamiliar emotion that might, if she dared to name it, be called hope. The morning of the competition dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn day that promised perfect visibility for shooters. Maya had slept fitfully, dreams of Kandahar mingling with anxiety about the day ahead. She rose early, washing in the small bathroom attached to the back room, and doing her best to make her worn clothes presentable. Greg arrived as she was brewing coffee, nodding in approval at her initiative. "Big day," he remarked, accepting the mug she offered. "You ready?" Maya nodded, though readiness felt like a foreign concept after so long simply surviving. "Diane's asking for you specifically," Greg continued. As her spotter for the 1,000-yard competition, it's the highlight of the day, biggest prize money, most prestige. The implication was clear. This was an opportunity, a chance to be seen and valued for her skills rather than pitied for her circumstances. Maya felt a flutter of something that might have been pride, quickly suppressed. "I'll do my best," she said simply. The academy filled quickly as competitors and spectators arrived. The buzz of conversation and equipment checks created a background hum that set Maya's nerves on edge, her combat-trained senses overwhelmed by the stimuli. She focused on her tasks, helping set up the final target placements, checking the wind flags, preparing the spotting equipment. Diane found her near the outdoor range, already dressed in her competition gear. A sponsored jacket emblazoned with logos and specialized shooting glasses. "Morning, Fletcher," she greeted with the brisk efficiency of someone focused on the task ahead. "Heard you're my spotter for the 1,000-yard. You good with that?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied automatically. Diane studied her for a moment. "Drop the ma'am. Makes me feel old. And while we're clearing the air, I know who you are." Maya stiffened. "Excuse me?" "Maya Fletcher, 3 tours, Distinguished Marksman Medal, that impossible shot in Kandahar that saved an entire unit." Diane's expression was unreadable. "You're something of a legend in certain circles." The recognition felt like exposure, as if a protective cloak had been ripped away. Maya fought the urge to deny it, to create distance between herself and the woman Diane was describing. "That was a long time ago," she said instead. Diane nodded, accepting the deflection. "Well, legend or not, I need a spotter who knows what they're doing. The 1,000-yard competition is stacked this year. Harrington's shooting, and he's good. So is Martinez from Texas and that new kid from Colorado, Jensen." The competitive assessment grounded Maya, shifting focus from her past to the practical. Task at hand. This she could handle. Wind calculations, minute adjustments, the technical aspects of long-distance shooting that required no emotional investment. "I've watched them all practice," she offered. "Harrington favors a slight delay on windy shots. Martinez rushes his follow-through. Jensen's good, but inexperienced, with variable conditions." Diane's eyebrows rose slightly, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. "Like I said, someone who knows what they're doing." She checked her watch. "Competition starts in an hour. I'll meet you at lane 4. As Diane walked away, Maya felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Cassie, excitement radiating from her like heat. "You'll never guess who's here," the younger woman bubbled. "The governor and some big shot from the National Rifle Association. They're presenting the awards later. This is going to be huge." Maya nodded, trying to match Cassie's enthusiasm while internally retreating from the implications of VIP attendance. More eyes, more attention, more potential for recognition she didn't want. The hour passed too quickly, and soon Maya found herself at lane 4, spotting scope set up, radio checked, preparing for the 1,000-yard competition. The event had drawn a substantial crowd, spectators lining the observation area behind the shooting stations, their chatter creating a low buzz of anticipation. Diane arrived precisely on time, her custom rifle assembled and ready. She settled into position with practiced ease, going through her pre-shooting routine with methodical precision. Winds from the northeast, 5 miles per hour, consistent. "Across the range," Maya reported, focusing the spotting scope on the distant target. "No mirage yet, but the temperature's rising." Diane nodded, making minute adjustments to her scope. "Call it when you're ready." Maya scanned the range once more, noting the positions of the other competitors. Harrington, 2 lanes down, focused and calm. Martinez adjusting his equipment with fussy movements. Jensen looking young and slightly overwhelmed by the occasion. "Ready when you are," she confirmed. The competition proceeded with the formal structure of a ritual. Each shooter had 10 rounds, fired in sequence, with scores announced after each set. The 1,000-yard targets were challenging even for professionals, requiring perfect technique and adaptation to conditions that could change between shots. Diane's first round was solid, 8 out of 10 in the center ring, putting her in second place behind Martinez. Harrington was third, with Jensen trailing in fourth. The crowd responded with appropriate appreciation for each successful shot, the atmosphere tense but supportive. Between rounds, Maya remained focused on the spotting scope, tracking subtle shifts in conditions that might affect the next series of shots. She was aware of Diane's sidelong glances, evaluating her performance as much as she was evaluating the range. "What would you change for the next round?" Diane asked suddenly, her voice low enough that only Maya could hear. The question caught her off guard. Professional shooters rarely solicited advice from their spotters, preferring to make their own judgments. Maya hesitated, then decided honesty was the simplest approach. "You're anticipating the recoil," she said. "Tightening your shoulder just before you squeeze creates a subtle pull to the right." Instead of defensiveness, Diane's response was a thoughtful nod. "Thought so. Bad habit when I'm competing. Harder to self-correct." "Focus on your breathing," Maya suggested. 3 count in, hold, squeeze on the natural pause. The second round showed improvement, 9 out of 10 in the center, putting Diane tied for first with Martinez. Harrington had moved up as well, just 1 point behind, while Jensen was falling further back, struggling with the changing wind conditions. The final round would determine the winner. The crowd had grown, word spreading about the tight competition. Maya noticed additional officials near the presentation area, including a man in a suit who had to be the governor and several military personnel in dress uniform. She kept her head down, focusing on the scope, her world narrowing to the target 1,000 yards away and the subtle tells of the environment between. "Wind shifting," she murmured to Diane, "coming more from the east now, gusting to 7 miles per hour. It'll push your shot left if you don't compensate." Diane adjusted her scope, her movements precise. "How much?" "Quarter-minute right should do it, and remember your breathing." The first shot was perfect, dead center. The crowd applauded, and Maya felt a flicker of satisfaction that had nothing to do with her own achievements and everything to do with the perfect execution of a technical challenge. Shot after shot followed, each one requiring minor adjustments. As conditions evolved, Maya called them with quiet confidence, her instincts honed by years of training and field experience. Diane responded with the fluid adaptability of a true professional, trusting Maya's observations implicitly. When the final scores were tallied, Diane had edged out Martinez by a single point, with Harrington close behind in third. The crowd erupted in applause, and Diane rose from her position, a rare smile breaking through her competitive focus. "Couldn't have done it without you, Fletcher," she said, extending her hand. "Best spotting I've had in years, maybe ever." Maya accepted the handshake, uncomfortable with the praise, but unwilling to diminish Diane's achievement. "You made the shots. I just called the conditions." Diane laughed, a short, sharp sound. "False modesty doesn't suit you. We both know the spotter can make or break a shooter at this distance." She hesitated, then added, "Have you thought about getting back into it? Professionally, I mean. I could use a spotter like you on the circuit." The offer hung in the air, unexpected and disorienting. Maya had become so accustomed to doors closing that she was unprepared for one to open. I can't," she managed, the default response of someone who had trained herself to expect the worst. Diane's expression showed neither surprise nor judgment. "Well, the offer stands. Think about it." Before Maya could respond, they were interrupted by the announcement calling winners to the presentation area. Diane gave her a final nod before making her way through the crowd, rifle case in hand, leaving Maya standing alone with the spotting scope and the echo of an opportunity she wasn't ready to seize. As she packed up the equipment, Maya became aware of a presence beside her. Harrington had approached silently, his expression unreadable. "That was impressive work, Fletcher," he said quietly. "You haven't lost your touch." Maya continued her task, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "Thank you, sir. You know, I've been thinking about Kandahar, about what you did that day." Maya's hands stilled, her body tensing. "I told you I don't talk about that." "I know." Harrington's voice was gentle. "But I think maybe it's time someone talked about it, especially with the governor and the NRA representative here." Alarm shot through her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that what you did deserves recognition, not just for the shot in Kandahar, but for all of it. Your service, your sacrifice." The panic that had been simmering beneath the surface all day threatened to overwhelm her. "No, absolutely not. I don't want recognition. I don't want attention. I just want to be left alone." Harrington studied her face, his expression softening. "Is that really what you want, Fletcher? To be alone? Because from what I've seen today, you come alive when you're doing what you were trained to do. When you're using your skills." The observation cut too close to a truth Maya had been avoiding, that the emptiness she had carried for so long had briefly abated during the competition, replaced by the familiar focus and purpose of her military days. "It doesn't matter what I want," she said finally, "that life is over. It doesn't have to be." Harrington gestured toward the presentation area, where officials were gathering. "There are people here who could open doors for you. The governor's office has a veterans initiative. The NRA has training programs that need instructors. I could introduce you—" "No!" Maya interrupted, more forcefully than intended. "No introductions, no explanations, no parades. I'm not a success story, Colonel. I'm not your redemption project." The harshness of her words hung between them, Maya immediately regretting the outburst but unable to retract it. Harrington's expression remained calm, understanding rather than offended. "You're right," he said simply. "It's not my place to decide what's best for you. I apologize." The sincerity of his apology disarmed her anger, leaving her deflated. "It's fine. I can't be what you want me to be." "I don't want you to be anything other than what you are, Fletcher. A damn good soldier who deserves better than sleeping rough and hiding her talents." Before Maya could respond, the PA system crackled to life, announcing the presentation ceremony. Harrington gave her a final nod before turning to join the other competitors, leaving Maya with the uncomfortable awareness that his words had found their mark. She finished packing the equipment and made her way back to the main building, intending to avoid the ceremony entirely. The back room beckoned, a quiet space away from the crowd and the complicated emotions the day had stirred. But as she crossed the lobby, Greg intercepted her, his expression uncharacteristically animated. "There you are. Been looking everywhere for you. Diane's asking for you at the ceremony. Wants you to join her on stage when they present the trophy." Maya shook her head. "I can't. I'm not. I don't do crowds." Greg's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, but he persisted. "She was pretty insistent. Said you were half the reason she won." The pressure felt like walls closing in, triggering the familiar fight-or-flight response that had governed too many of Maya's decisions since coming home. She took a step back, her breathing shallow. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her anything. I just can't." Understanding dawned in Greg's eyes. "All right. I'll make your excuses." He hesitated, then added, "But Fletcher, you can't run forever." The words followed her as she retreated to the back room, closing the door on the sounds of applause and celebration. She sank onto the cot, adrenaline draining away, leaving her exhausted and hollow. The challenge coins lay on the small table beside the cot, the one she had carried for years and the new one from Harrington. She picked them up, feeling their weight, symbols of a life that seemed increasingly distant, yet had reached out to touch her today in unexpected ways. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She ignored it, hoping whoever it was would go away. The knock came again, more insistent. "Fletcher, it's Diane. I know you're in there." Sighing, Maya rose and opened the door. Diane stood in the hallway, still in her competition gear, the trophy, an impressive silver cup, cradled in one arm. "You missed the ceremony," she said without accusation. "Sorry, I'm not good with crowds." Diane nodded, accepting the explanation, without question. "Wanted to show you this." She held out the trophy. "It's as much yours as mine." Maya shook her head. "No, it's not. You made the shots. Based on your calls." Diane's expression was serious. "Look, I've been doing this a long time, had spotters from military, law enforcement, private sector. None of them had what you have, that perfect integration of technical knowledge and instinct. It's rare, Fletcher, and valuable." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to Maya. "My offer stands. I compete year-round, national and international. Need a consistent spotter. Pays good, travels covered. No pressure, but think about it." Maya took the card automatically, the gesture becoming familiar after a day of receiving offers she had no intention of accepting. "I will," she said, the polite lie easier than explanation. Diane studied her face, seeming to see more than Maya was comfortable revealing. "One more thing. Harrington told me about Kandahar." Maya tensed. "Did he now?" "Not details, just that you made a shot that saved his unit. A shot most people would consider impossible." Maya stood frozen, the weight of Kandahar pressing down on her shoulders like a physical burden. The fluorescent lights of the back room seemed to dim as memories surged forward. Dust and heat, the radio crackling with desperate voices, the impossible distance, and the lives hanging in the balance. "It wasn't impossible," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Just improbable. The right conditions, proper calculations, steady hands." Diane shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "And exceptional talent. Don't diminish what you did, Fletcher. Not everyone could have made that shot, perfect conditions or not." The praise made Maya uncomfortable, as if she were claiming credit for something that belonged to a different woman entirely. The Sergeant Fletcher, who had believed in her mission, who had trusted her training, who had not yet seen how quickly purpose could dissolve into meaninglessness. "It was a lifetime ago," she murmured, the phrase becoming her mantra, a barrier between past and present. Diane studied her for a long moment, then nodded, seeming to accept the boundary Maya had drawn. "Well, my offer stands. Think about it." She turned to leave, then paused. "There's a dinner tonight for the competitors and staff. Greg says you're welcome to join." Maya shook her head. "I don't think so." "Your call." Diane's tone remained neutral, free of judgment. "But just so you know, you've made an impression today. On me, on Harrington, on everyone who saw you work. That doesn't go away just because you hide in the back room." After Diane left, Maya sank back onto the cot, her mind churning. The day had brought too many reminders, too many recognitions. She had spent years cultivating invisibility, becoming a ghost in her own life, and in a single afternoon, that carefully constructed anonymity had begun to crumble. She considered leaving, gathering her few possessions and slipping away before anyone could ask more questions or offer more opportunities she wasn't prepared to accept. The thought of returning to the streets, to the day-to-day struggle of mere survival, held a perverse comfort in its familiarity. But as she reached for her backpack, Her hand brushed against the challenge coins on the table. The metal was cool against her fingers, grounding her in the present moment. She picked them up, weighing them in her palm, symbols of recognition and belonging that she had both cherished and resented. A knock at the door interrupted her contemplation. Expecting Greg or perhaps Harrington again, she was surprised to find Cassie standing in the hallway, still wearing her event staff t-shirt, but now with a jacket thrown over it against the evening chill. "Hey," the younger woman said, her usual exuberance tempered by uncertainty. "I was heading out and wanted to check if you needed anything." The simple kindness caught Maya off guard. She had grown so accustomed to defending against pity or judgment that straightforward compassion felt almost foreign. "I'm fine," she replied automatically. Cassie nodded, seeming to expect the response. "Okay, well, there's leftover sandwiches in the fridge if you get hungry, from the competitor lunch." She hesitated, then added, "You were amazing today. The way you spotted for Diane, everyone was talking about it." The comment stirred a complex mix of pride and discomfort in Maya. "Just doing what I was asked to do." "No," Cassie said with unexpected firmness. "It was more than that. You have a gift. My dad always says that when you find what you're meant to do, it doesn't feel like work, it feels like purpose." The word struck Maya like a physical blow. Purpose. The thing she had lost, the absence that haunted her empty days and restless nights. The thing the military had given her and civilian life had stripped away. Cassie seemed to sense the impact of her words. "Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow. Final day of the competition and all that." After Cassie left, Maya found herself too restless to remain in the back room. The academy was quiet now, most staff and competitors having left for the dinner or their hotels. She wandered through the empty building, past the trophy cases and competition photos, eventually finding herself in the indoor range. The space was dark, lit only by the emergency exit signs that cast a soft red glow across the lanes. Maya stood at the firing line, muscle memory positioning her body in the familiar stance, feet shoulder-width apart, shoulders aligned, hands raised as if holding a rifle that wasn't there. "Figured I'd find you here eventually." The voice startled her. Maya turned to find Greg in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the hallway. He flipped a switch, and a single row of lights illuminated the range, enough to see by without the harsh glare of full lighting. "Sorry," Maya said, stepping back from the firing line. "I was just—" "No need to apologize." Greg moved to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the targets at the far end of the range. "It's in your blood, isn't it? The shooting." Maya didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Diane says you're one of the best she's ever seen," Greg continued, "and Harrington can't stop talking about some shot you made in Kandahar. Must have been something special." The mention of Kandahar again made Maya tense. It was just a shot. Greg turned to look at her, his weathered face thoughtful. "No such thing as just a shot at the distances you were working. Every pull of the trigger is a decision, a commitment." Something in his tone made Maya look more closely at him. "You served." It wasn't a question, but Greg nodded anyway. 2 tours in Gulf 1. Nothing like what you saw, but enough to understand. The revelation shifted something in Maya's perception of him. Not just a range director, but a fellow veteran, someone who might comprehend the weight she carried. "When did you start working here?" she asked, curiosity temporarily overriding her reticence. "After I got out. Needed something that made sense, you know, something with clear targets, measurable results." He gestured around the range. "Found this place when it was just a cinder block building with 6 lanes. Built it up over 20 years. The pride in his voice was evident, a quiet satisfaction in creating something lasting. Maya felt a twinge of envy for his clarity of purpose. His ability to transition from military to civilian life with his sense of self intact. How did you do it? The question escaped before she could contain it. How did you adjust? Greg seemed to understand the depth behind her simple query. Wasn't easy. Had my share of bad nights, bad years even. Difference was I had anchors, family, friends who wouldn't let me drift too far. He paused, studying her face. You didn't have those. It wasn't a question, and Maya didn't treat it as one. The truth of his observation was self-evident in her current circumstances. The thing about anchors, Greg continued, is that you can drop them yourself. Doesn't have to be someone else keeping you grounded. Maya scoffed softly. That's simple, huh? Didn't say it was simple. Greg's tone remained even. Said it was possible. There's a difference. They stood in silence for a moment, the empty range a quiet witness to their conversation. Finally, Greg spoke again. You planning on coming to the dinner? Maya shook her head. Not my scene. Fair enough. He didn't push, which Maya appreciated. But if you change your mind, it's at the grill on Main Street, 7 o'clock. He turned to leave, then added, and Fletcher, the offer to spot tomorrow still stands. Diane specifically requested you again, said she wouldn't work with anyone else. After Greg left, Maya remained in the range, the silence wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. She moved to the equipment locker, where the spotting scopes were stored, running her fingers over the cases with a sense of longing she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge in years. The past she had been running from had caught up with her today, not as the nightmare she had feared, but as a reminder of competence, of value, of purpose. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. On impulse, she left the range and made her way to the front office, where a computer sat on the reception desk. It had been years since she'd used the internet, but the mechanics came back quickly enough. She typed Kandahar Sniper Save Unit into the search engine, curious about what might appear. The results surprised her. News articles, military blog posts, even a mention in a book about modern warfare. Her name wasn't in most of them, her identity protected by military protocols, but the shot was described in terms that made her uncomfortable. Miraculous, impossible, legendary. One article included a quote from a surviving officer. Whoever made that shot didn't just save our lives. They reminded us that even in the darkest moments, someone was watching over us. Maya closed the browser, unsettled by the mythology that had grown around an act she remembered primarily for its terror, the knowledge that if she failed, people would die, and if she succeeded, she would take a life to save others. The moral calculus of warfare, distilled into a single moment. She returned to the back room, her mind churning with the day's revelations. The cot seemed less appealing now, the small space feeling confining rather than secure. On impulse, she gathered her backpack and the challenge coins, tucking them into her pocket before leaving the academy. The evening air was crisp, the small town of Easton quiet as dusk settled. Maya walked without conscious direction, letting her feet carry her past storefronts closing for the day and houses where families gathered for dinner. The normality of it all, the simple rhythms of civilian life, had once seemed like a mockery of her fractured existence. Tonight, it felt like a glimpse of something just beyond her reach. She found herself on Main Street, where the grill's windows glowed with warm light, silhouettes of people visible through the glass. The competitors' dinner would be in full swing, Diane and Harrington and the others celebrating their achievements, sharing stories, belonging to a community that understood their specialized skills. Maya stood across the street, watching, a ghost at the periphery of connection. She could walk away, return to the academy, or find a sheltered spot to pass the night. No one would notice her absence, or rather, they would expect it, having already categorized her as someone who didn't participate, who didn't engage. The thought rankled, a spark of defiance flaring in her chest. Was that who she had become? Someone so defined by avoidance that even strangers could predict her reactions. Before she could reconsider, Maya crossed the street and pushed open the door of the grill. The warmth and noise hit her like a physical wave. Conversation, laughter, the clinking of glasses and silverware. She hesitated in the entryway, fighting the instinct to retreat. "Fletcher, you made it!" Diane's voice cut through the ambient noise. She was seated at a large table in the center of the restaurant, surrounded by other competitors. She waved Maya over with a genuine smile that seemed at odds with her earlier competitive intensity. Maya approached slowly, acutely aware of her worn clothes and unwashed hair in the relatively upscale setting. But as she reached the table, she was met with nods of recognition and a few raised glasses. "Pull up a chair," Diane instructed, shifting. "To make room, we were just debating the merits of different barrel profiles for long-distance shooting. The topic was so familiar, so technical, that Maya found herself relaxing slightly. This wasn't small talk or prying personal questions. This was shop talk, the language of professionals discussing their craft. As she settled into the conversation, Maya became aware of Harrington watching her from across the table. His expression wasn't pitying or judgmental, but quietly pleased, as if her presence represented some small victory. The evening progressed, and Maya found herself drawn into discussions about equipment specifications, competition strategies, and memorable shots. She spoke little, but listened intently, absorbing the camaraderie and shared passion that flowed around the table. "You know what I can't figure out," said Martinez, the shooter who had placed second behind Diane, "is how Fletcher here called that wind shift in the final round. There was no visual tell that I could see." All eyes turned to Maya, curiosity evident in their expressions. She hesitated, unaccustomed to being the center of attention. "There was a change in the sound," she said finally. "The way the wind moved through the safety flags at the far end of the range. Pitch shifted slightly, indicating a directional change before it was visible. The table fell silent, competitors exchanging impressed glances. "You heard that?" Jensen, the young shooter who had placed fourth, sounded incredulous. "From 1,000 yards away?" Maya shrugged, uncomfortable with the focus on her abilities. "It's just pattern recognition. You learn to use all your senses." "That's not something you learn in a manual," Harrington remarked. "That's instinct honed by experience, the kind that comes from real-world application." The implication hung in the air. Maya's skills hadn't been developed on competition ranges, but in combat zones, where the stakes were measured in lives rather than points. The conversation shifted, but Maya could feel the subtle change in how the competitors regarded her, with increased respect, certainly, but also with a kind of curious distance, as if her combat experience had placed her in a different category altogether. "The financial structure remains critical," James emphasized, his accounting background focusing on sustainable implementation beyond immediate agreements. "Partnership frameworks require economic viability to survive beyond initial enthusiasm. The specialty market development must generate sufficient revenue to maintain both orchard operations and preservation activities." As their discussion continued, Martha arrived with news that completed their immediate campaign. "The Bank Review Committee has issued their findings," she reported, her expression revealing positive developments before her words confirmed them. "They've identified systematic calculation irregularities affecting heritage orchard loans throughout the region. All affected mortgages are being recalculated according to original terms, with refunds for excess payments and extended timelines to address missed payments during financial hardship." The announcement represented final validation of their initial allegations, official confirmation that the financial struggles threatening heritage orchards hadn't resulted simply from agricultural economics or management decisions, but from questionable calculation practices that had created artificial vulnerability. "They're not acknowledging deliberate manipulation," Martha continued, her practical assessment cutting through legal terminology. "But they're correcting the errors and implementing enhanced oversight protocols to prevent similar irregularities in the future." "Corporate speak for 'we're fixing it without admitting wrongdoing,'" Thomas translated, with the slight smile of someone who recognized the language from extensive experience. "Standard damage control when evidence makes denial untenable, but admission creates liability exposure. Whatever they call it, the practical outcome remains the same," Eleanor observed, focusing on implementation results rather than terminology. "Affected orchards receive financial relief, while the trust structure prevents future vulnerability through individual isolation." The following day, Eleanor received the official mortgage recalculation notice from First Oakridge Bank. The adjusted balance reflected a 37% reduction from previous statements, with extended payment timelines and reduced interest rates, creating sustainable financial parameters that would allow continued operation without compromising heritage preservation. The document represented more than merely corrected calculations. It symbolized transformed power relationships resulting from community organization and strategic intervention. What had appeared as overwhelming institutional authority had yielded to collective determination when isolated vulnerability gave way to coordinated resistance and legal accountability. That evening, Eleanor sat on her porch, watching sunset illuminate the heritage orchard section with golden light. The trees that had witnessed 4 generations of Mitchell family stewardship now represented something beyond individual legacy, connection points within community preservation network, addressing fundamental agricultural heritage through collective governance rather than isolated vulnerability. Lily joined her, the evening ritual of shared reflection having deepened through their preservation campaign. Their relationship had transformed alongside their circumstances, mutual respect replacing occasional tension, shared purpose transcending differing perspectives, complementary strengths creating integrated approach toward common objectives. "Dad would have been proud of what we've accomplished," Lily observed, invoking her father's memory with the confidence of someone who had grown into her own strength rather than merely reflecting ancestral legacy. "Not just saving the orchard, but helping create something that protects all these varieties for generations to come." Eleanor nodded, recognition in her expression. He always understood that what made these trees valuable wasn't their commercial productivity, but their irreplaceable genetic diversity and cultural significance. The trust structure honors that understanding in ways that transcend our specific property. "The individual trees might eventually grow old and die," Lily continued, her horticultural knowledge informing philosophical perspective. "But the varieties they contain will continue through grafting and propagation, preserved through community governance rather than depending on any single orchard's survival." The observation captured essential transformation in their heritage preservation approach, from individual responsibility toward collective stewardship, from isolated vulnerability toward distributed resilience, from family legacy toward community governance, addressing fundamental agricultural heritage beyond specific property circumstances. 2 years later, the Oakridge County Agricultural Center hosted a dramatically different gathering from that tense foreclosure auction, a regional Heritage Apple Festival, highlighting preservation achievements and educational initiatives developed through the Trust's implementation. Representatives from 7 states attended, including agricultural officials, preservation organizations, horticultural researchers, and culinary professionals studying their governance framework for potential implementation throughout regions. Facing similar consolidation pressures, Eleanor stood near the entrance, observing proceedings with measured satisfaction, reflecting earned achievement rather than simple pride. The festival represented significant validation beyond specific circumstances. Their defensive response to corporate consolidation had developed preservation methodology addressing fundamental agricultural heritage questions with potential application. Throughout similar regions facing comparable challenges, Lily approached from a cultivation demonstration where she had presented grafting techniques to visiting agricultural students. Her studies had evolved towards specialized focus on heritage variety preservation, combining academic research with practical implementation experience through her leadership position within the Trust's propagation program. The New England delegation is particularly interested in our governance structure, she reported with characteristic analytical precision. Their apple diversity challenges make our distributed preservation approach especially relevant despite different environmental conditions. They've invited trust representatives for implementation consultation next month. The external validation represented important confirmation beyond regional circumstances, their governance framework demonstrating potential application throughout diverse agricultural regions despite specific development addressing consolidation threat. The methodology had transcended particular corporate resistance toward fundamental resource management approach, balancing preservation requirements with sustainable agricultural operations. James emerged from financial sustainability session, where he had facilitated discussion between trust leadership, state officials, and foundation representatives regarding implementation framework balancing preservation objectives with economic viability. His analytical abilities had proven especially valuable, translating agricultural operations into financial structures while maintaining essential connection between economic systems and preservation requirements. The Agricultural Diversity Grant, guidelines incorporating our preservation protocols, have received final approval, he reported with characteristic precision, complementing Lily's assessment. The heritage governance framework we developed under emergency conditions has officially become recommended implementation methodology throughout regions with similar agricultural history. This programmatic validation confirmed national significance beyond specific trust development, their community response creating governance approach with recognized application throughout comparable agricultural areas facing similar preservation challenges. The threatened foreclosure had catalyzed methodological innovation addressing fundamental agricultural heritage with potential generational impact throughout American specialty agriculture. Thomas joined their conversation, his involvement having evolved from emergency intervention toward agricultural preservation advisory capacity within broader corporate responsibility initiatives. His business background continued providing essential strategic perspective beyond specific circumstances, connecting their preservation implementation with broader agricultural sustainability considerations. Your trust model has fundamentally influenced heritage preservation governance beyond specific regional application, he observed with characteristic directness. The integration of community determination, scientific preservation, and economic sustainability represents significant methodological advancement addressing essential relationship between agricultural heritage and modern market realities. The assessment acknowledged broader impact beyond immediate corporate resistance, their defensive response developing governance framework addressing fundamental agricultural questions regarding community determination, genetic preservation, and sustainable operations within changing economic conditions. The methodology balanced legitimate preservation requirements with essential economic considerations, creating viable alternative to both uncoordinated individual management and centralized corporate control. As scheduled programming concluded, and participants transitioned toward community dinner at the adjacent Heritage Orchard tour, Eleanor found herself standing momentarily alone near the agricultural center entrance where foreclosure auction had nearly eliminated her family's heritage. The academy was quiet, the competition not scheduled to begin for several hours. Maya made coffee in the small kitchen, the familiar routine grounding her in the present moment. "Thought I'd find you here." She turned to find Greg in the doorway, looking unsurprised to see her already awake and functioning. He accepted the coffee she offered with a nod of thanks. "Big day," he remarked, settling at the small table. "Finals for all categories. The 1,000-yard is last, the main event." Maya nodded, already aware of the schedule. "Diane's in a good position, thanks to you." Greg studied her over the rim of his mug. She was impressed, said you heard things even she couldn't detect. Maya shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just experience." "More than that." Greg's voice was matter of fact. "It's a gift, Fletcher, the kind that shouldn't be wasted." The implicit question hung in the air between them. What would she do after today? Would she accept Diane's offer, explore Harrington's suggestion of Veterans Haven, or would she disappear again, returning to the anonymity of homelessness and disconnection? Maya didn't have an answer. Not yet. The clarity she had felt last night remained, but its implications were still unfolding, possibilities branching, like rivers from a single source. "One day at a time," she said finally, echoing the mantra of recovery programs she had attempted and abandoned. Greg nodded, accepting the non-answer. "Fair enough, but just so you know, if you wanted something more permanent here, at the academy, we could work something out. Always need good instructors, people who know what they're doing." The offer surprised her, though perhaps it shouldn't have after a day of unexpected opportunities. "I don't have certifications, paperwork, a fixed address." "Details," Greg dismissed with a wave of his hand. "The skills are what matter. The rest can be sorted out." Before Maya could respond, the front door chimed, signaling the arrival of the first staff members for the day. Greg drained his coffee and stood. Think about it. No rush, no pressure, but the offer's there. As the academy came to life around her, Maya retreated to the back room, using the quiet space to center herself before the day's events. She laid out her few possessions on the cot, the challenge coins, Diane's business card with her competition, schedule, the address of Veterans Haven that Harrington had provided, and now the implicit offer from Greg, a collection of lifelines, each representing a different path forward. She had spent so long surviving day to day that the concept of future planning felt almost foreign. Yet here were options, concrete possibilities that extended beyond the immediate question of where she would sleep or how she would eat. The recognition was both exhilarating and terrifying. Freedom of choice after years of constriction, the potential for failure, but also for something more than mere existence. A knock at the door interrupted her contemplation. Cassie poked her head in, already wearing her event staff t-shirt and an enthusiastic smile. "Morning! Greg asked me to let you know that Diane's looking for you. She's at the outdoor range, doing some preliminary checks." Maya nodded, gathering herself. "Thanks, I'll head out there." "Great!" Cassie's perpetual cheerfulness was somehow less grating today, perhaps because Maya recognized the genuine goodwill behind it. "Oh, and I brought you this." She held out a paper bag. "Breakfast sandwich from the cafe down the street. Thought you might be hungry." The simple kindness, offered without fanfare or expectation, caught Maya off guard. "Thank you," she said, accepting the bag with genuine gratitude. "No problem," Cassie beamed. "You were amazing yesterday. Everyone's talking about it. They say you're the secret weapon that's going to help Diane win the 1,000-yard today." The characterization made Maya uncomfortable. She wasn't anyone's secret weapon, but she recognized the well-meaning intent behind Cassie's words. "I'm just doing what I know how to do." "Well, you do it better than anyone I've ever seen," Cassie replied with unabashed admiration. "Anyway, I should get back to the registration desk. Good luck today." After Cassie left, Maya ate the sandwich gratefully, realizing she hadn't had a proper meal since the previous day's lunch. The simple act of fueling her body, of recognizing and meeting her basic needs, felt like a small victory, a step towards self-care that had been absent from her life for too long. Fortified, she made her way to the outdoor range, where competitors were already gathering for the day's events. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, the final day of competition bringing heightened stakes and focused energy. She found Diane at lane 4, methodically checking her equipment with the precision Maya had come to expect from her. The champion shooter looked up as Maya approached, a smile breaking through her competitive focus. "There you are, ready for today." Maya nodded, already scanning the range conditions with practiced eyes. Winds lighter than yesterday, consistent direction, temperatures stable, good conditions. Diane's smile widened. "Knew I could count on you for the technical assessment, but that's not what I asked. Are you ready?" The emphasis on the personal rather than the professional caught Maya off guard. She hesitated, uncertain how to respond to the implied concern for her well-being. "I'm here," she said finally, the simple statement conveying more than a lengthy explanation could have. Diane seemed to understand. "Good enough for me." She returned to her equipment check, then added casually, "Harrington told me about your conversation last night, about Veterans Haven." Maya tensed, defensive barriers rising automatically. "Did he?" "It's a good place," Diane continued, her tone carefully neutral. "My brother went there, after his second tour. He was in rough shape, not unlike what you're going through. They helped him find his footing again." The personal connection surprised Maya. "Your brother served?" Diane nodded, her focus still on her rifle as she made minute adjustments to the scope. "Marines, 2 tours in Iraq, came back different. Struggled for a while. Veterans Haven turned things around for him." She glanced up, meeting Maya's gaze directly. "He's one of their counselors now. Specializes in working with combat veterans dealing with PTSD. The information settled between them, neither a suggestion nor a pressure, but simply context. Another piece of the expanding puzzle that Maya was trying to assemble. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, the acknowledgement as close to commitment as she could manage. They worked together through the morning, establishing a rhythm that felt natural despite their brief acquaintance. Maya's assessment of the range conditions proved accurate, giving Diane a competitive edge that kept her at the top of the standings as the preliminary events concluded. The 1,000-yard competition was scheduled for early afternoon, giving competitors time to rest and prepare. Maya used the break to retreat to a quiet corner of the academy, away from the crowds that had gathered to watch the finals. The constant stimulation, voices, movement, the expectation of social interaction was draining. Her capacity for engagement stretched thin after years of isolation. She found a bench in a small courtyard behind the main building, where the sounds of the competition were muffled, and she could breathe without the weight of observation. Closing her eyes, she practiced the breathing techniques that had once been part of her pre-mission routine. 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. A method to calm the mind and steady the hands, to focus attention and clarify purpose. "Mind if I join you?" Maya opened her eyes to find Harrington standing a few feet away, his expression quietly respectful of her space. She gestured to the bench beside her, neither welcoming nor rejecting his presence. He sat, maintaining a considerate distance. Needed a breather? She nodded, grateful for his understanding. Too many people. Gets overwhelming, he agreed. Even for those of us who haven't been through what you have. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the competition providing a backdrop to their shared solitude. "I spoke with Meredith this morning," Harrington said eventually. "My wife. She called Veterans Haven just to check if they have space available." Maya tensed slightly. "I haven't decided yet." "I know." His tone remained gentle, free of pressure. "Just wanted you to know that if you do decide to go, there's a place for you. No waiting list, no bureaucratic hoops, just a bed, meals, and people who understand what you're going through." The offer hung in the air between them, neither demanded nor diminished. Maya found herself oddly touched by the careful way Harrington presented it, as an option rather than an expectation, a potential resource rather than a presumed solution. "Thank you," she said simply, the words encompassing more than the immediate offer. Harrington nodded, accepting the broader gratitude. "How are you feeling about the 1,000-yard today?" The shift to professional matters was a relief, a return to territory where Maya felt confident. Conditions are good. Diane's in strong form. She has a good chance. And you, ready to help her secure that win? Maya nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. That's the plan. As the time for the final competition approached, the Academy buzzed with anticipation. The 1,000-yard event was the pinnacle of the weekend, drawing the largest crowd and the most intense focus from competitors and spectators alike. Maya found herself at the center of unexpected attention, whispers following her as she made her way to lane 4. The story had spread. The homeless veteran whose spotting had propelled Diane to the top of the standings. The mysterious woman with the uncanny ability to read wind and distance. She kept her head down, uncomfortable with the scrutiny, but determined to fulfill her commitment to Diane and to herself. The champion shooter was already in position when Maya arrived, her focus absolute as she made final adjustments to her rifle. She acknowledged Maya with a nod, their partnership now established enough that extensive communication was unnecessary. Maya set up the spotting scope, checking the conditions with practiced efficiency. Winds from the northeast, 3 miles per hour, consistent across the range. Temperature stable, no mirage effect yet, but it's building as the ground warms. Diane absorbed the information with a slight nod, adjusting her scope accordingly. Competitors. Harrington's in lane 2, focused and calm. Martinez is in lane 6, seems tense, rushing his setup. Jensen's in lane 8, looking more confident than yesterday. The assessment earned a small smile from Diane. "Comprehensive as always. We've got this, Fletcher." The competition began with a formality that belied the intensity of the challenge. Each shooter had 15 rounds, fired in 3 sets of 5, with scores announced after each set. The 1,000. 6 months later, the morning air at Veterans Haven carried the crisp promise of approaching spring. Maya stood on the porch of the main building, coffee mug warming her hands as she watched the sunrise paint the eastern sky in hues of gold and rose. Her breath formed small clouds in the cool air, dissipating like the ghosts of her past that had gradually loosened their grip on her present. The decision hadn't been immediate or simple. After the competition in Easton, Maya had spent a week camping in the woods outside town, sorting through the options that had presented themselves, weighing choices against fears, possibilities against risks. The prize money from Diane had provided a cushion of security, removing the immediate pressure of day-to-day survival and allowing her the luxury of deliberate consideration. In the end, it wasn't one factor, but a constellation of realizations that led her to Veterans Haven, the recognition that she couldn't heal in isolation, that the skills she possessed were too valuable to waste, that purpose wasn't something to be found, but something to be built, step by careful step. The facility had surprised her. Not the institutional setting she had feared, but a converted farmhouse on 30 acres of rolling woodland, home to no more than 20 veterans at a time. The program was structured but flexible, with individual therapy alongside practical skill building and community integration. Most importantly, it recognized that recovery wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, difficult days, moments when progress seemed impossible. "Morning, Fletcher." The voice belonged to Dr. James Reynolds, Diane's brother and one of the counselors. At Veterans Haven, he joined her on the porch, his own coffee mug steaming in the morning air. "Doctor," she acknowledged with a nod, their relationship having evolved from formal therapeutic sessions to something approaching collegial respect. "Big day," he remarked, his tone casual, but his eyes assessing her with professional care. "Feeling ready?" Maya considered the question, not with the automatic deflection that had once been her default, but with genuine self-awareness. "As ready as I'll be." Today marked a significant milestone in her journey, her first official competition. As Diane's permanent spotter, the public debut of their professional partnership. The past months had been a careful building process, with Maya splitting her time between Veterans Haven and weekend trips to join Diane for practice sessions and smaller, local competitions. The arrangement had been Diane's suggestion, a gradual integration into the competitive circuit, allowing Maya to acclimate to the travel, the crowds, the visibility that came with association with a champion shooter. Today's event, a regional qualifier for the national championships, represented a step up in profile and pressure. "You've put in the work," Dr. Reynolds reminded her, "both in therapy and on the range. Trust your preparation." The simple encouragement reflected his approach to treatment, practical, grounded, focused on building skills rather than excavating trauma. It had been effective for Maya, providing tools to manage her PTSD without defining her by it. "One day at a time," she replied, the phrase no longer a deflection but a genuine philosophy, a way of approaching challenges without becoming overwhelmed by their entirety. Dr. Reynolds nodded, understanding the significance of the mantra. Diane texted, "She'll be here at 8 to pick you up." The competition was being held at Easton Shooting Academy, a deliberate choice that Diane had arranged, a return to the place where their partnership had begun, where Maya had taken her first steps back toward engagement with her skills and the world. After Dr. Reynolds left to begin his morning rounds, Maya returned to her room to complete her preparations. The space reflected her 6 months at Veterans Haven, still Spartan, but with personal touches that would have been unthinkable during her homeless years. A small bookshelf held volumes on marksmanship and environmental reading, alongside history and philosophy texts borrowed from the facility's library. A corkboard displayed her growing collection of competition credentials, each one representing a small victory over isolation and inertia. On the bedside table sat the challenge coins, the original from her unit and the one Harrington had given her, now joined by a third from Diane, presented after their first official competition together. Beside them was a framed photograph. Maya and Diane at that first competition, both focused on their equipment, unaware of the camera capturing their professional synchronization. Maya packed her competition bag with methodical precision, spotting scope, weather gauge, rangefinder, notebook for recording conditions. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from years of military preparation now repurposed. For civilian competition, She changed into the clothes Diane had provided, not a full sponsorship uniform yet, but professional attire bearing the logo of the shooting academy where Diane trained, identifying Maya as part of the team. The fit was still strange, the crispness of new fabric a stark contrast to the worn clothes that had been her uniform during homeless years. At precisely 8 o'clock, a vehicle pulled into the driveway of Veterans Haven. Maya shouldered her bag and made her way outside where Diane waited beside a SUV emblazoned with sponsor logos. "Ready to defend our title." Diane greeted her with the focused enthusiasm that characterized her approach to competition. Maya nodded, settling her bag in the back before taking the passenger seat. "Weather report looks promising. Clear conditions. Light winds from the northwest." "Perfect for breaking records," Diane replied with a confident smile. "We've been hitting consistent groupings in practice that would shatter the regional benchmark." The casual inclusion, "we" rather than "I," still caught Maya by surprise sometimes, the acknowledgement of their partnership as integral to success rather than supplementary. It was one of many small affirmations that had gradually rebuilt her sense of professional worth over the past months. As they drove toward Easton, Maya found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a ghost in her own life, disconnected from purpose and possibility. Now she was en route to a professional competition with a temporary home at Veterans Haven, regular therapy addressing her PTSD, and a growing network of connections replacing the isolation that had defined her post-military existence. "Penny, in for your thoughts," Diane remarked, glancing away from the road briefly to study Maya's expression. "Just measuring distance," Maya replied, the phrase encompassing more than the miles between locations. Diane seemed to understand. Homeless veteran female was told to watch at the range. Then her 1,000-yard hit silenced the pros. Part 1. The acrid tang of gunpowder hung in Maya's nostrils, a phantom scent that followed her everywhere, a ghost of her former life. Huddled on the park bench, her weathered jacket pulled tight against the autumn chill, she watched the world pass by with hollow eyes. The precise marksmanship that once made her a legend, now relegated to distant memory. The shooting range stood like a fortress at the edge of town, its red brick facade and bold sign promising precision and power to those who entered. Inside, laughter and the rhythmic percussion of gunfire created a symphony of confidence, a stark contrast to the silence that had become Maya's constant companion. She lingered at its perimeter, drawn to the familiar sounds yet hesitant to cross the threshold that separated her past from her present. The small town of Easton prided itself on its patriotism, evident in the flags that adorned nearly every storefront and the annual Memorial Day parade that drew crowds from neighboring counties. Yet for all its star-spangled enthusiasm, the town remained oblivious to the woman who slept in its shadows, a decorated veteran whose medals now lay at the bottom of a backpack alongside her fading hopes. Maya Fletcher stood at the chain-link fence, her fingers curled through the metal as she watched the shooters on the range. Some were weekend warriors, their stances awkward and their grips uncertain. Others moved with the fluid confidence of professionals. She studied them all with the clinical detachment of someone who had once been the best. "You planning on coming in or just casing the joint?" The voice startled her, gruff but not unkind. Maya turned to find a barrel-chested man with salt and pepper hair watching her, arms crossed over a polo shirt emblazoned with Easton Shooting Academy. "Just watching," she replied, her voice raspy from disuse. The man, whose name tag identified him as Director Greg Winters, nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as they took in her threadbare clothes and the military-issue duffel at her feet. "You shoot?" he asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Maya's laugh was hollow. once upon a time. Military? She nodded, a short, sharp movement that discouraged further questions. Greg seemed to consider. This, his weathered face creasing in thought. We've got a charity event this weekend. Professional marksmen competing, raising money for veteran services. Could use someone to help set up targets, maybe run the sign-in table. The offer hung in the air between them, neither charity nor demand, but something in between, an opportunity. Maya felt something stir within her, a flicker of purpose that had been absent for so long. I could do that, she said finally, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Greg handed her a card with the Academy's logo and an address scrawled on the back. Be there tomorrow, 7 a.m. We'll see what you've got. As he walked away, Maya stared at the card, its edges sharp against her calloused fingertips. A door had opened, just a crack, but it was more than she'd had in months. The following morning arrived with a chill that seeped through Maya's layers as she approached the academy. The sky was still dark, the first hints of dawn just beginning to paint the horizon. She had spent the night beneath the town's water tower, her backpack as a pillow, her thoughts racing between hope and terror. Greg was already there, unlocking the front door as she approached. He acknowledged her with a nod, saying nothing about her early arrival or the same clothes she'd worn the day before. Coffee's inside, he said simply, pushing the door open. The academy was larger than it appeared from the outside, with an indoor range to the right and a sprawling outdoor facility visible through the back windows. Trophies lined the walls, alongside photographs of serious-faced competitors holding rifles aloft. Maya's eyes were drawn to a poster announcing the weekend's event, Precision Challenge, Pros, Shoot for Vets. The irony wasn't lost on her. Greg emerged from a back room with 2 steaming mugs, handing one to Maya without asking if she wanted it. She accepted gratefully, the warmth seeping into her hands. So, he began, settling into a chair behind the front desk, what's your story, Fletcher? Maya tensed, her fingers tightening around the mug. What makes you think I have one? Everyone's got a story, especially folks who end up watching shooting ranges from the outside. She took a sip of coffee, buying time. Not much to tell, served 3 tours, sniper unit, got out, couldn't adjust. Greg's eyes lingered on her face, seeing more than she wanted to reveal. PTSD! The acronym hung in the air, clinical and cold, failing to capture the nightmares that plagued her, the panic that seized her lungs in crowded places, the memories that ambushed her when she least expected them. Among other things, she admitted. He nodded as if her vague response confirmed something he'd already suspected. VA help at all? Maya's bitter laugh was answer enough. Well, Greg said, draining his mug, we've got work to do. The outdoor range needs to be prepped for the competition. 4 stations, 1,000-yard targets. Think you can handle it? The challenge in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Maya straightened, a spark of her old pride flickering to life. I could do it in my sleep, she replied. As the day progressed, Maya fell into the familiar rhythm of range work. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget, the precise measurements between firing positions, the careful placement of target stands, the methodical checking of safety equipment. Greg worked alongside her, his movements efficient and purposeful, asking few questions, but watching her with an attention that suggested he was making mental notes. By midday, other staff began to arrive, mostly younger men and women who looked at Maya with curiosity, but kept their distance, taking cues from Greg's businesslike demeanor. The pros start arriving tomorrow for practice, Greg informed her as they broke for lunch, sharing sandwiches from a local deli. You'll be helping, Cassie at the registration table, then assisting on the range as needed. Maya nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety forming in her stomach at the thought of being surrounded by people. professionals who would recognize the technical knowledge she possessed, who might ask questions she wasn't prepared to answer. "Where are you staying?" Greg asked suddenly, the question catching her off guard. She hesitated, unwilling to admit that her accommodations consisted of whatever sheltered corner of town she could find each night. Greg's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "We've got a cot in the back room. Sometimes staff crash there during tournaments. You're welcome to it." The offer was made casually, without pity, allowing Maya to accept without feeling like a charity case. She nodded, relief washing over her at the prospect of a roof, however temporary. That evening, after Greg had left, Maya sat on the edge of the cot, the shooting range quiet around her. On impulse, she pulled her backpack close and dug through its contents until her fingers found the small velvet pouch hidden at the bottom. Inside was her most prized possession, a challenge coin given to her by her commanding officer after she'd made a shot that saved her entire unit. The weight of it in her palm was comforting, a tangible reminder of who she had once been. She fell asleep clutching it, her dreams for once free of explosions and screams, replaced by the methodical rhythm of breath control and the perfect moment of a clean shot. The next morning brought chaos as competitors began to arrive. Maya found herself stationed at the registration table alongside Cassie, a cheerful college student whose rapid-fire questions Maya deflected with monosyllabic responses until the girl got the message and focused on welcoming the arriving shooters. Maya recognized some of them from magazines and training videos, men and women whose names were spoken with reverence in military circles. They carried custom rifles in hard cases, their movements conveying the easy confidence of those at the top of their game. One man in particular caught her attention, tall and lean, with a military bearing that was unmistakable even in civilian clothes. As he approached the registration table, Maya felt a jolt of recognition, quickly followed by a surge of panic. Colonel James Harrington had been her commanding officer during her second tour, before his promotion had taken him to a different unit. He had witnessed her at her best. Now he would see her at her worst. Maya ducked her head, hoping to avoid recognition, but as he reached the table, his stride faltered. "Fletcher?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "Maya Fletcher?" She looked up reluctantly, meeting his gaze. "Sir." Harrington's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been concern. "What are you doing here?" Before she could answer, Greg appeared at her side. "You two know each other?" "Colonel Harrington was my CO," Maya explained, her voice tight. "Second tour." Greg's eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing. Harrington was still staring at her, taking in her worn clothes and the dark circles under her eyes. "I heard you were out, but I didn't expect to find me working registration at a shooting competition." Maya finished for him, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "Life takes unexpected turns, sir." An awkward silence descended, broken only when another competitor called Harrington's name from across the room. He hesitated, clearly wanting to say more. "We should catch up," he said finally, "after the registration rush." Maya nodded non-committally, relief flooding through her as he moved away. She felt Greg's eyes on her, but avoided his gaze, focusing intently on the registration forms before her. The morning passed in a blur of names and numbers, Maya functioning on autopilot as she processed competitors and answered basic questions about the event. She was aware of Harrington's occasional glances in her direction, but pretended not to notice, grateful for the constant stream of people that kept confrontation at bay. Around noon, Greg tapped her shoulder. "Need you on the range. Some of the pros want to do practice runs, and we're short-staffed for spotting." Maya followed him outside, where the autumn sun did little to warm the crisp air. The outdoor range was impressive, a sprawling expanse with shooting stations at various distances, the farthest targets barely visible at the 1,000-yard mark. "You'll be spotting for lane 3, Greg instructed, handing her a high-powered spotting scope and a radio. "Call hits and misses, wind changes if you spot them." Maya took the equipment, a familiar weight in her hands. Spotting had been part of her training, the symbiotic relationship between spotter and shooter essential for long-distance accuracy. She positioned herself at the designated spot, setting up the scope with practiced efficiency. The shooter assigned to lane 3 was a woman Maya had seen in competitive shooting magazines, Diane Reynolds, multiple national champion and Olympic medalist. She approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the best in any room. "You my spotter?" she asked, her tone making it clear she expected someone more impressive. "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied, falling back on military formality. Diane looked skeptical, but didn't argue, instead focusing on setting up her rifle, a custom-built precision instrument that probably cost more than most people's cars. Maya watched her through the scope as she settled into position, noting the perfect form, the controlled breathing, the steady hands. "Winds coming from the west, about 3 miles per hour, Maya reported, falling easily into the roll despite the years away from it. Slight updraft near the target. Diane, adjust. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.